we talked about shifting from like this medical model to social model. So you're
Yeah,
ready to
that's
dive
where
in.
we're going. That's where we're going because, as we all know, special education evolved out of a medical model, fix the person. Okay, so what we're going to do is I want you to imagine a place. Okay, it could be any place. This can be Hong Kong. This can be a birthday party. This can be a classroom. I'm going to talk about a classroom because we're talking education right now, but this is so much bigger than just education. What we all, how we were all taught to view kids who are struggling is through a medical model of disability. Okay, well, we're well-meaning, like I can't say that enough times. And we were taught that if someone is not having success, and what that looks like in a classroom is we have kids who have challenging behavior, we're having kids who are disengaged, we have kids who are increasing in anxiety, non-attendance. Like we know what it looks like when kids are struggling, okay? And so what we were taught to do was if there's a student who is struggling, we need to find out what's wrong. It totally is a triage model, Sherry. You're absolutely right. And so what happens is we have to find out what's wrong because something's wrong. And so then they go get assessed, they go get diagnosed, and we write an IEP for them. And this is how we were taught to view students. But if we think about then the stairs, that doesn't talk about the stairs at all, right? And if you think about when you go to the doctor when something is wrong and they assess you and they diagnose you, and if they can't, they send you to a specialist. Like our entire special education model is around this. And so then this IEP is designed to fix a student so they can then go back into the classroom. But we get to this point in education where you can't fix disability because disability isn't broken. Disability is an identity. So it becomes this like sinkhole of resources of trying to fix kids. You can't fix kids. And then inclusion comes around and we're like, we'll just send them back even if they're not ready. So then teachers are really, really struggling because they're like, but they're not fixed. They're still having challenging behavior, but it's because we actually haven't solved the problem, which is what are the barriers that are getting in the way? So a really great metaphor for this isn't my metaphor, but it's a good one, is that quote that says, if a flower doesn't bloom, like you look at the environment, not the flower. Like it's very, very easy to cut a flower, like a dying flower out of a garden. Your garden looks great again. You can put it in the compost, but flowers die for a reason. They need water, they need more sunlight. And so if we don't actually ask the question, what's happening around the flower, more flowers are going to die. Plus, the disability community is being like, hi, I'm not broken. Here I am. This is who I am. I like me. And so it's looking at disability, not from a medical perspective, but from an identity perspective, that we need disability as much as we need everything. It's a part of who we are as humans. So why are we fixing it? It's not about fixing it. So then how do we respond to the needs of people with disabilities? That's very different than responding to the disability of disabilities. So the disability community has said, there's another way where you can meet our needs. It's called the social model of disability, which is if there's someone who's struggling, like a person who can't get up the stairs, maybe it's the context that we need to assess. Maybe it's the context around the individual that's getting, like, what are the barriers that are getting in the way? So if you think about the garden, there are things that all flowers need. All flowers need light. All plants need light. They need space. They need moisture. They need to be free of pests. And so when we think about kids in a classroom, there's going to be needs that all kids have, because all kids have needs, even if they don't have disabilities. Okay. And so thinking about it from this perspective, it's okay, if we can attend to the context, then we support all of the flowers. If we make sure that the garden has water, all of the flowers will benefit. And so it's more looking at a student who's struggling as almost a symptom that something's wrong around them. So if we can figure out what the barrier is for one and reduce it for everybody, it's going to benefit many students, which is where the UDL gets really efficient. Now, I got to tell you what happened next. So I show this slide, and a teacher that I was working with was like, Shelly, but our gardens are not one flower. Like we have like diverse gardens. We're not just growing one plant. So how does the social model work if all of our plants have different needs? And I'm like, okay, that's a really, really, really good point. It's almost like we need a combination of the two. So then I go digging and I find a third model, and it's called the person place model of need. So the first thing I love about this is that it's not about disability, it's about needs, which frees disability up to be an identity. Okay, so now we're just talking about the needs of all kids. This isn't about autism. This isn't about learning disability. This is about what needs do people with autism have, similarly to what needs do people who are Italian have. Like it's oh my goodness, Ananda, totally, like don't even get me started on the problems of monoculture. Like biodiversity is critical, right? So let's plan for the needs of all kids. You may have 5 kids with autism, but you might have 30 kids who need support with social skills and communication. And so it frees disability up. Now let's look at needs. So in a person place model, it says, and Katie already talked about this, it says that a person's needs are actually not dependent on their disability. They can be connected, but really it's more connected to where they are and their context at any given moment in time. So you may have some needs in Hong Kong and different needs in Toronto, right? And so it's looking at the interaction between who you are and where you are. Succulents needs are different. I mean, Alicia, right? This teacher, she's like, I have cactuses and I have orchids and temperamental plants that bloom once every 17 years. Like, what do you do when there's different plants? So the person place model says, first we look, what does everybody need? What does everybody need? There are basic needs for everybody. And if we have one student who's struggling, you can guarantee there's going to be a handful of other kids that are struggling, just maybe not enough to qualify. So attending to the whole garden is always going to benefit more than one. So let's look at what are some like needs. You can even design for individuals, but as universal as possible, you're always going to benefit more than one flower. Okay. If you think about a garden, there's going to be needs that everybody has. And so if you look at kind of like the infrastructure of education, you could be the best teacher on the planet. There are always going to be learning needs. Just because kids are different, there's always going to be equity needs because the system wasn't designed to be inclusive or equitable. And so UDL is one of those frameworks that just assumes from the start, like Katie says, the variability. There's always going to be kids who have who need learning support. That's going to be our sunlight. So let's just look at how we can reduce barriers to learning. There are many different needs that students have. UDL is one. If we look at equity, we could talk about anti-racism is going to reduce barriers. Culturally responsive teaching is going to reduce barriers. There's a lot of efforts in terms of SOGI, sexual orientation, gender identity. Those are going to reduce barriers. I mean, if you look at, when we talk about reducing barriers to equity, we're talking about how do we specifically reduce barriers for students who've experienced marginalization and oppression. So, and I mean, like the intersections are huge. UDL is can go across both of those. UDL is designed for learning, but it's going to affect so much more. So if we can look at kind of the big rocks, right? What do all kids need? What do all classrooms need? What that's going to do is bring down the crisis. It's going to bring down the crisis so that we can actually look and see what the needs are. If you think of a garden, if there's no water, every flower is going to look like they're dying. It doesn't matter what their individual needs are. So if we can take care of the needs of everybody, then we can reduce that crisis to say, okay, well, how does this flower differ from this flower? How are the needs of this student different from the student within this context? So then this is where we got this idea of, because some plants, just like, who was it, Alicia, some plants need more space. Some plants need more light. Some plants need companion growth. Marigolds go great with tomatoes because they keep the slugs away. You know, I mean, there's strategies we can implement so that plants can grow together, but we can't even get there if there's crisis. And so that person place model, the place is the stairs. Let's just make it so that we have as little barriers as possible around, and then we can look at the individual needs that students have. So this is where the seed packet came in, because I was like, well, then what's the point of IEPs? What's the point of IEPs? So then I'm thinking, what if I was a gardener? What if I was a gardener and I had all these different plants and I'm trying to figure out what I need to do so that all my plants grow. I may not have the experience or knowledge to know about every single plant. I'm going to like call Katie up because she may have knowledge on a specific plant. But the idea here is there has to be a place where we can go that we can learn more about a plant and how to help it grow. And so then I'm thinking, what if we thought of IEPs in this way, right? An IEP that actually communicates to a classroom teacher the needs of a particular plant, the needs of a particular student in terms of who they are, what they need to grow, what conditions do they need in the environment. And this is where the seed packet came from, because I actually really believe in IEPs. They have a really important role in terms of advocacy for some students who need the most support. But how do we build them in ways that support the garden, not support the changing of the plant? And so here's one little example. This is a mom who's a good friend of mine who has a little guy with Down syndrome, and she like took this to heart and she designed herself.
So is this Connor's mom designed Connor's seed packet?
Yes. So like, no, like Danielle was just like, I'm going to do this for my kid. And so they came together as a family and created what would Connor's seed packet look like. And so you can see, here's the vision statement. Why is he amazing? Why is he incredible? What are his strengths? What is he going to offer to your garden? What doesn't work in his garden? What does work in his garden? What does he love? And how is he growing? And what was cool was that usually, like when I first started learning about IEPs, they were like locked up in a cupboard and I couldn't read them. But what was neat about this is that Connor was so proud of this. He like handed it out to the grocery store, to the swimming pool, like all the places that he went, because he wanted people to know. No, he wanted people to know who he was. You know, like that's so different than like these like deficit-based documents. And that's exactly it, Autumn, is that every time I show this, they're like, well, why don't we just do this for all kids? I'm like, exactly. Why not? Like, why do IEPs have to be something different? How about we look at it in terms of this is a way to get to know who a kid is, how they grow, and what they need to grow, not how does Connor need to change.